Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to another Legion live developer Q&A. My name is Josh Allen, aka Community Manager Lore, and joining me here today to talk about some world quests and demon invasions is Senior Game Designer Jeremy Feasel. How's it going?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. Had a little bit of last-minute panic, forgot my earbuds, but I think we're going to be good. So before we get into these questions here today, why don't we start off just by having you explain a little bit, like, what is it you do on the team? How are you related to world quests and demon invasions? What sort of who are we talking to, basically?
World Quest and I are related intimately. So I was the content supervisor for the team that worked on kind of the alpha and the omega of the expansion pack, the bookends. We worked on the pre-launch event, the Broken Shore, all the pre-launch quest lines, the demon invasions, as well as what you do in the end game, all of the world quest system and how all of that stuff works. And I mean, that was a lot of fun. It was cool being able to do both kind of the intro to the expansion pack as well as the long tail that you do at the end game. It got us thinking in a lot of different spaces, but also how to tie the two together in a way that made sense.
Nice. All right, so let's start with the alpha of these questions. First one here comes from, I think it's pronounced Kuos, who said, "Are you planning to regularly update world quests and their rewards as we dive into the future patches?"
I love it when you give me an easy first question like this that I can just straight up answer yes to. Yeah,
Nice.
that's a great idea. So when we developed the World Quest system, we wanted to create a system that felt internally easy for us to add additional content to. It's very fast for us to make additional world quests, but we ran into some additional pitfalls with that, and luckily we've been able to solve all of those problems. World quests operate in what we kind of call buckets internally, and you'll hear me refer to that term several times as we're talking about the different questions. That essentially means that a group of world quests is mutually exclusive with other world quests in that space. You can imagine that if you go to High Mountain, you only have a certain number of High Mountain world quests up for that day,
Right.
so that as we add new world quests in the future, they don't suddenly turn your map into this great big Christmas tree where it feels like you have 100 things to do at the beginning of the day.
Right.
In addition, we made an iteration on that where we can increase the probability of new world quests that we add to the system showing up, so that when we
nice.
do add new content, you're seeing it more often. And it's very easy for us to swap out old world quests that are feeling a little bit stale or like they need an upgrade. So very much, yes, we're looking forward to adding new world quests to the system as the patches continue.
Nice. All right, let's move on to the next question. It comes from Chibi, who asked, "Are you planning on adding world quests to old zones over time or in a future expansion to give players a reason to go back to them?" So kind of taking the world quest concept that's being added, obviously, in the Broken Isles and Legion and saying, okay, well, let's put some of those in Kalimdor and put some of those in Northrend or something.
While we're really liking how world quests are working out so far, let's all keep in mind that it is a first iteration of the system.
Right.
We want to see how it plays out. We want to see what things players really like and what they don't like, what they'd like to see more of. That said, this is one of those very first questions that kind of came out as we started talking about world quests, so we started talking about the different types of content we could do for world quests, and especially event-based world quests. And you'll see a little bit of us starting to dip our toes into this water in terms of the Legion invasions, which are essentially zone-wide world quests that take place in the old world. You'll open up your map, you'll see an entire zone has a Legion marker over the top of it, and the whole thing is taken over by Legion during that period of time.
Nice.
You can go there anytime that it's being invaded. You group up with a ton of other people, and you take down kind of a meta objective. It's our first foray into this large-scale group questing where we're all contributing to one major quest objective. That didn't 100% answer your question, though, which is, will we continue to do this as the expansion pack goes on? And I think once we figure out exactly what we like about world quests and what additional things we want to do with world quests, we will continue iterating on them. It's definitely not off the table. But to give you one concrete answer, yes, you will be seeing at least one world quest show up in the old world during our patch content that we're already planning for, and that is our revamped fishing tournament. The fishing tournament's going on hiatus for a little while. It'll be returning as a world quest. And world quest is great for that kind of content. It tells players, hey, there's something going on here, and also this is the loot that you can get for it, and this is how often that it will occur. It kind of solves a lot of those problems of messaging that we've had with where you had to already know that a quest was going to occur or an event was going to occur before it happened,
Nice.
or else you would completely miss out on it.
Nice. Cool. Moving on. Next question comes from Bantam13, which is a very rhyming name. It's very
I
excellent.
applaud you for naming like all of the player names for these too. Like he didn't look at these beforehand. Like this is on the fly.
Anyway, question here comes from the name that I said a second ago. Will World Quests be a viable alternative to dungeoning and raiding for gear and other items? So if I just all I want to do is World Quests, that's all I'm ever going to do. Am I going to be able to gear myself up in the same way that I could through dungeons and through raids?
Yes, with a but. Everything has a but. Sorry. And in this case, it's up to you as a player to opt into what you want to do in order to progress your character. A big part of what we were talking about a little bit earlier with the itemization changes to the game, where you can get gear and player progression from doing just about anything you can do in the endgame in Legion, is that we're opening up the possibility, just like you're talking about, of doing world quests and only world quests to obtain your gear as a player. But that said, the big caveat there is that the most difficult content you can do at any given time will have, on average, the best chance at increasing your item level. So you're still going to want to be doing those raids. You're going to want to get together your Mythic Plus groups. You're going to want to scan the world to see if there are dungeon and raid boss world quests that have really great loot for you. World quests aren't mutually exclusive with dungeons and raids. They kind of all exist within a very similar space. And choose what kind of character progression path works for you. But if you're a player that just wants to do world quests, absolutely. If you're a player that just wants to do PvP or dungeons or raids, absolutely, you can just do those things. It's up to you.
Nice. Yeah, that seems to be kind of a lot of what's going on, and a lot of different features in Legion is, if you just want to do this, you can do that. You could theoretically get a best in slot mythic piece of gear from doing it.
Absolutely.
And the chance will probably be lower, but yeah, it's very cool.
Play your way.
Yeah. Question here from, I'm just going to pronounce it hummus. I'm sure that's wrong, but I don't know. I'm entertaining myself by pronouncing this hummus.
You're entertaining all of us.
Question, he asked, do you have any plans to add an option to filter through available world quests based on certain criteria, such as time left, type of reward, faction, etc.?
Yes, actually, we already have a couple of filters in the game. You'll be able to filter out primary and secondary profession, as well as pet battle world quests. And again, since this is our first iteration of the system, we would very much like to hear what additional filtering options players would like to see. We have also already seen the mod community coming up with really cool world quest mods that allow you to see world quests from anywhere, to filter them out in a bunch of different ways. So I'm absolutely certain that the mod community is going to create really awesome and hand-tailored stuff, and we'd very much like to hear what elements of those mods you'd like to see wrapped into the base game UI.
Nice. Yeah, that's kind of always been sort of Blizzard's approach to add-ons is we'll make sure that the base game is super functional, get the sort of like the features everyone absolutely needs into the base game, and then let add-on creators go nuts, come up with new features if they want to. So
everybody likes to tailor their UI into their own personal play style, and and some things always float to the top from that in terms of, hey, wow, that is a really cool idea. We should definitely do that.
Yeah, it's also possibly worth mentioning at this point, just for some context on this Q&A. Obviously, a lot of these questions, if you've been like really hardcore playing the beta, if you have access, or if you've been really following fan sites super closely, you might already know the answer to some of these questions. But we're talking to lots of people right now, so we want to make sure everybody knows the answer to these. Obviously, somebody didn't know the answer, or else the question would not even be here to begin with. So let's move on. Next question comes from Maury, who says, how do you plan on incentivizing, world quests once people have the gear they want and don't need Order Hall resources anymore? Apparently that was very difficult for me to read, so I'll leave it on the screen there for just a second.
This is a really interesting question because there's a little bit of a presupposition here that this player has finished the game. So let's talk first about Order Hall resources and the role that the Order Halls play in Legion. It's a little bit different than the Garrison mission system in that in a lot of cases the Order Hall system is funneling back into making you more effective out in the game world. You're pumping up your bodyguards that can help you do world quests, you're giving yourself additional call down powers and zones that can help you defeat that big world boss. The order hall system also creates a multiplier on the artifact XP that you get, which again further incentivizes you to go out and do world quests that reward artifact XP. So there may be a point at which you personally feel like you may not need order hall resources, period, because it's going to be very difficult to get to a point where you're maxed out. But you may get to a point where you feel like you can opt out of doing order hall resources,
right.
or you can de-incentivize yourself for those for
there's
your
other
particular
things
player.
that you'd rather be spending your time on.
Right, and you can lower them down in the bucket, knowing that there are a ton of other things you can do to progress your player. You can be going for gear, you can be doing Mythic Plus dungeons, you can be going for particular pets or mounts or battle pets, or very specific crest rewards that come from specific world quests. Our goal was to give you far more world quests on the world map on an average day than you can complete, so that you can pick and choose what you want to. And it's absolutely okay to get to the point where it feels like, hey, I don't really want to do the mission system as much as I've been doing anymore. I'm kind of feeling pretty good on order hall resources. I'm going to go for artifact XP or gold or gear this week.
Cool. So it's kind of like that could tie into the question here as well, just incentivizing those world quests. Like maybe there's a point where you say, okay, I'm not really super worried about, like, I've finished my artifact and I'm not worried about alternate specs or anything like that. Or maybe you've finished all 3 artifacts for your class, which will take a while. But maybe say, a while from now you've done that, you can say, all right, well, I'm just going to keep an eye on the world quests that give mounts, or I'm going to keep an eye on the world quests that give me a big chunk of gold or something like that.
And hopefully that opens you up to doing other things in the game that maybe you haven't had time for.
Yeah.
That said, we've created enough of these systems such that it will be very difficult for you to max all 3 of your artifacts out, get all of the appearances, max out your order hall, get completely Titan Forged, all mythic level gear, and get all of the legendaries you want. That said, as I'm saying this, I know that there is one player that's going to send me a tweet that is going to be like, I'm done. Look, I'm done. I have all of the things. I finished.
I got everything.
And
you said it couldn't happen.
Let us know if you can get there. Ideally, by that point, we have created more content for you to consume.
Right. Yeah, kind of that idea of making sure you always have something that you can go and do, which is cool. All right. Got a philosophical question here for you. It comes from Deidrit, who asked, between too many dailies in Mists of Pandaria and not enough world content in Warlords of Draenor, what kind of approach did you take to solve both problems for Legion and ensure both types of players are satisfied? I kind of love this question because it sort of illustrates, like, as we were going back and forth between Mists of Pandaria, there was obviously that very, very strong feeling like there are too many daily quests for me to do. There's too much stuff for me to go out and do. And then in Warlords, we kind of had the opposite problem where people, we often saw feedback that was like, I just sit in my garrison. I don't need to go out and do anything. So how are we splitting the difference there with Legion?
From a design perspective, when we were coming at the ideas behind the end game of Legion, where we wanted to start from was what we felt was probably the most fulfilling experience. And I think that you hit the nail on the head. MOP, although it did feel like it had too many dailies, man, there was some really great content in the end game there that we all, I think, really liked. We really glommed onto.
A lot of people look back to the Dominance Offensive and say, that was amazing. Like, why don't you do more of that?
During the patches, there was a feeling of progression of storylines. Yeah. Within the patches, there was the feeling that you could do your Golden Lotus things, and those would eventually unlock the Celestials and the Crane Temple. There was a variety of different things to do as world quests would, or quests. Sorry, everything's world quests now. Quests would switch on a weekly basis. That said, when we looked at that system, there were also some things that we felt like we could improve on. So I would call this a V2 of MOP's daily quest system.
Okay.
So we wanted to improve on MOP's daily quest kind of from 3 major perspectives. One of them was your moment-to-moment gameplay of what am I doing and what am I being rewarded with. I think everybody had that feeling during MOP of, I'm going to get on and I'm going to get kind of this list of like 20 world or daily quests. I'm going to do that every time. 20 daily quests that I need to do today.
Right.
But none of those quests are going to feel individually particularly rewarding. I might get a small amount of rep and a small amount of gold, but the reward was really a month, 2 months down the line when I would finally unlock the revered or exalted rewards from the vendor, which were high player power items, which would help progress me in my raid. And then everything up to that point, you kind of didn't really care about.
And you're kind of like, how many times do I have to get this same guy out of this same cage?
How many times do I have to save Lyle Softfoot? Yeah, how does this keep happening to him?
Yeah.
We should put a GPS tracker on that guy, like a leash. So that was one way that we wanted to improve the system. We wanted to make it feel like you can imagine logging into MOP's world and getting your 20 daily quests for the days. And some of them would reward you with like 1,000 gold. And then some of them would reward you with artifact XP. And there's a battle pet on this one. And there's a trinket on this one that I really want. And there's a trinket for my alt on this one. And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What if you could take a look at that list of quests at the beginning of the day and see that some of them got you really cool stuff today? Suddenly, you're doing things in a different order than you would do normally. And that's changing up your daily process. And it's mixing it up. So I feel like that new loot scheme has really solved a lot of our extrinsic reward problems in terms of, do I feel like I'm getting cool stuff for logging in every single day? And yes, you will totally get cool stuff for logging in every day. Yeah.
And you don't feel like you have to, like you've gotten a shopping list or a honey-do list sort of thing. Like, okay, go do these 15 things, and then you might get something cool at the end of it. It's like, okay, go do this one thing, and you'll get this.
You are guaranteed to get this cool thing.
Yeah.
And that also allows you to strategize as a player. You can determine what order you want to do these things in, not just based on, what their proximity is to where your hearth is, but in terms of how you want to progress your character. Another thing that we did like about MOP and we wanted to continue doing, but throw a little bit of a twist in, was the feeling that there was this variety of different quests to do. We have close to 1,000 world quests. We have far more endgame quests in Legion than we did in Mists of Pandaria.
Nice.
And that allows us to spawn them up outside of this daily cadence. So you no longer have a shopping list like you were talking about of things to do when you log in for the day. Things are constantly happening. Every 3 hours, new world quests are popping in and popping out with new rewards. Every 6 hours, major faction quests are popping in and popping out. So rather than having that list of things to do, it feels more like the world is active and it's alive and it's kind of constantly changing.
Nice.
Over time. And that kind of got us away from that daily feeling and into a little bit more of a long-term feeling of the world being active. And third, we wanted to get away from the idea of you falling so quickly behind like you could in MOP dailies, where the rewards at the very end were double gated behind both rep and valor.
Yeah.
And we solved that from two different directions. One of them is the loot direction, as you will be able to get loot that is effective for your player just by doing these quests without having sort of that final point. But another thing that we did was we added some concept of capacitance to these world quests. If you don't log in for several days, you will have more world quests than somebody that is completely clearing their map every day because of the way the world quest frequency and repops work. Some world quests will stick around for 3, 4, 5 days, but new ones will pop every 2 days. And that creates a capacity where if you don't log in for 2 days, you'll have 2 of them instead of just one of them to do. Allows you to take a little bit of time off, but the great majority of those world quests are highly incentivizing, highly rewarding. They're rare elite ones, they're dungeon ones. So when you don't log in for 3 or 4 days, you're going to find a whole lot of very highly rewarding things to do, which should allow you to progress your character immediately.
Yeah, that's really cool too, because it means that like if I'm like trying to work around, like I'm actually traveling to New York this weekend for a WoW Arena Cup. And if I'm traveling and I'm not able to get to my computer and log in and do my world quests, I can come. I'm doing it backwards now. I'm saying daily quests instead of world quests. I'm able to come back and say, okay, now I have this giant list of things, but there's more really cool ones than there would have been if I was logging in every single day, if that makes sense. So that's really cool. I like that a lot.
And there's even one more part to this that I want to get to before you click the button, if I can remember it. And that's that, man, some of the things that we really liked about MOP were the variety in some of the daily quests that you could do. Things that were off the beaten path, like the Roll Club and things like that. And that was a driving force towards our creating a huge variety of different world quests. There's everything from pet battles to professions to rares that are very difficult for a player to solo, to rare elites, to dungeons, to PvP, to mini games. All of those kind of things felt really awesome in MOP, and we doubled down on that idea and opened our designers to creating a lot of wild and wacky ideas, with the idea that maybe some of these things you won't see for 2 months. You won't see the same world boss but 4 times a year because of the sheer number of them that we made. It should always feel like there's new things to log in and do in WoW.
Nice. That's very cool. All right. Question here from Trivia Cow, who said, Moo. Okay,
Moo.
It's a cow. This makes sense. Could one of the bonus weekend events give bonus rewards to world quests?
Sure, let's totally do this. It's a great idea. Oh, yeah. So we're totally doing this.
Cool.
Because it's a great idea. What would formerly be the Apex this weekend is replaced with World Quest weekend.
I mean, I can't still farm Apexis in Legion?
You can go back if you really want to. It gains you bonus reputation with the various factions that you're doing world quests for, and also chances at additional loot. That said, we're not going to be turning on the bonus weekends for a number of weeks into the expansion patch launch. They're not going to kick off immediately when the expansion patch launches because we're going to have a lot of stuff to do in the game at that point. You don't necessarily need to be funneled into particular activities. But it's something that we definitely want to do.
Yeah, it would kind of suck to like brand new expansion. There's tons of stuff to do. Oh my god, I have so many different options, but I should go do pet battles.
We're going to take this choice away from you immediately.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's let the system breathe for a little bit.
Yeah, cool. I think you kind of answered this a second ago, but we'll go ahead and ask it anyway.
Answer it again.
Yeah. Question from Soraside on Twitter, who asked, will there be world quests that are PvP related?
Yes. Actually, in two different ways. So we came at this question initially thinking kind of from two different directions. One of them was, what if we just put like 5 Stranglethorn arenas in the game? Like, what if that? And then we incentivized you for doing them. And that got us into the world of, well, what if we did wackier stuff than that? All of the things that we can never do in an arena. I don't know if you remember back in the day when arenas had like firewalls that raised up and down that would like instant kill you.
R.I.P. Ring of Valor.
Yeah. So we can never do that again. But we can totally do that in outdoor world PvP FFA world quests, and it feels super awesome.
Yeah.
So there's an FFA, a dark pit that you can go down into that's just a death gladiatorial pit where you can wreck other players and get berserking buffs. You can ride on the back of a mountain goat and attack other players in one of the other locations. In a third location, you get to turn into a Murloc, and you go into the Murloc faction. You get to blow up players as a Murloc. Yeah, we really wanted to incentivize world PvP in a lot of fun and wacky ways that we've never done before. Similarly, we wanted to dip our toes into the concept of PvEVP. You might have been familiar with this if you were ever in a Wintergrasp that didn't have a whole lot of players in it. Going and attacking one of those PvP towers kind of felt like, all right, I'm watching my back, and I could get attacked by a rogue at any point, but it's a little bit more of a PvE objective. So you're going to see these in the Warden towers that the various different factions of the Alliance and Horde have taken across the Broken Isles that are manned up by enemies of the other faction that are various different player classes, and we've tuned them to be pretty difficult and powerful so that when you are attacking them, you're a little bit of a target of opportunity for players of the other side that wanted to come and defend that tower. That said, this wouldn't really work if you weren't flagged for PvP when you attack those creatures. So if you want to opt in to attacking one of those towers, it's going to flag you, and you're going to be open for PvP for a while so that other players can come and attack you. And this is kind of, it's a first attempt at sort of optional PvP where the other side isn't incentivized for coming necessarily and defending their tower, but they can if they want to. So you might totally get jumped by a rogue while you're trying to take out that objective. And again, all world PvP contributes into the honor system, so even defending a tower, even if you're not directly told to do that, killing other players while you're doing that, gets you honor.
Nice. And yeah, we obviously we get lots of questions that are related to world PvP, and I think this is kind of a good indication of sort of the philosophy behind what world PvP is, where like a battleground or an arena that's kind of that's a little bit Formula One. World PvP is a little bit more wacky races. So we're kind of like anything goes in world PvP, whereas in the arena, that's where we really have the clamp down, like the specific stats and these different things are disabled. World PvP is kind of anything goes, and so having these sort of world quests and world areas that really encourage that and say, okay, you're going to turn into a freaking Murloc. How do you balance Murlocs? That doesn't even make sense.
You don't.
Balance is not a thing anymore.
You have fun.
Just
you make it overpowered.
Yeah, go and have fun and leave it at that. All right, question here from Macazrax. I'm going to say Macazrax. Said, are pet battle world quests going to have any progression tied to them beyond the pet system?
Well, finally, we get to discussing pet battles. I've been waiting so long for this. I love pet battles. Yeah. Yes, so pet battle world quests both contribute to the pet battle system itself. You can get your pet battle charms from there. You can level up tokens. You can get fun vanity items. That can also contribute towards your artifact XP, your order hall progression, your personal player gold progression, and they can be done in order to finish your emissary quest for that zone as well. They count for your sort of meta level emissary quest for that zone. So short answer, yes. Long answer, yes.
Okay, and just for people that maybe haven't been following along in the beta, following along on fan sites, could you explain what an emissary quest is and how that ties into the whole world quest system?
For sure. So in order to ground kind of what you were doing into the game world, but also to give you various different, I'm going to call it bites. You can take different bite sizes of content during the day. We wanted to give you something that gave you a little bit of direction when you very first logged in for the day. You can imagine it's very similar to logging into Hearthstone for the day. And you get your cool little flippy around quest that says you need to do 5 warrior quests or et cetera, et cetera. You kill a certain number of minions.
Right.
Very similar for us. Every day when you log in, you will have an emissary that tells you, hey, the High Mountain tribes could really use your help right now. Come and do 4 quests for the High Mountain tribes. You can do PvP quests in High Mountain, you can do dungeon quests or world bosses or any of the world quests that take place in High Mountain you can do. So you're going to have a wide variety of different choices, different ways to get to that 4 things completed. When you complete those 4 things for the day, you will get an emissary cache, which is a highly rewarding bag and a huge amount of reputation.
Okay.
So that's kind of your first bite. If you want to do just your emissary quest for the day. Emissary quest lasts for 3 days, so you can have a capacity of 3. If you don't log in for 3 days, you'll have 3 of those waiting for you. And then you should feel like you can strategically take larger and larger bites if you have more time that day to play World of Warcraft. Your first and best bite is probably killing off that emissary quest. Your next bite is probably taking out world bosses and very rewarding rare elites, and then dungeons, and then kind of all of the other world quests, and then all of the other content in terms of how quickly you want to progress your character. But again, that also depends on what part of your character do you want to progress. Certain world quests are going to be better for artifact XP versus player power versus order hall resources, etc., etc. So you should feel like you can kind of map out where you want to take your character, but also how much time do you want to spend playing WoW for that day versus how rewarding it's going to be on kind of any given day.
Cool. All right. Next question comes from DG Gonzo, which is a great name. Who asked, are any of the world quests going to drop legendaries?
It's great that we just talked about these emissary caches because those are the portion of world quests that have a chance to drop legendaries. So you're always going to want to do your emissary quest for the day. It can absolutely drop a legendary item. Legendaries out for all of the remainder of world quests out in the world. Not currently, although we'd very much like to hear your feedback on that. We're kind of feeling like there are a lot of world quests to do. So many that you could potentially completely grind your face off trying to get legendaries from them.
Yeah.
And that's not really the gameplay that we're looking for. We don't want it to feel like a list of chores that you have to do all of every week in order to win the legendary race.
Yeah, it should be something that you just sort of pick and choose. I feel like these are important and I'm not as worried about these ones right now, sort of thing.
Totally.
Cool. Question comes from Minotaur, who says, will factions only be a UI element for world quests, or will new story quests unlock as we progress through the reputation steps?
We really like this concept. It's super cool, the idea that you can progress the story of your faction by doing their world quests, and rather than have very linear quest experiences from unlocking, say, Revered, it will unlock a new portion of the world with a new set of world quests you've never seen before that continue that faction's storyline. You're going to see exactly this kind of progression in Suramar, where as you progress through all of the Suramar chapters and all of the Suramar reputation levels, you will delve deeper and deeper into the city, and you're going to start to get an idea of what Elisandra and Gul'dan are doing, and that's going to help set up our story for the Nighthold, which is the raid that we'll be unlocking in the future.
Cool. Question from Capuchu1 on Twitter, who asked, in terms of the kind of quests we'll see, will they be more closely related to level up quests or more event-like in nature?
I think we've talked a little bit about this already. You're going to see everything under the sun, both mini games, level up quests that we've taken a little spin to, rare spawns that you've already fought before but now have 3 additional abilities and can one-shot you with any of them. You're going to see world bosses. You're going to see additional dungeon events and dungeon creatures spawn in dungeons that you wouldn't usually get. In addition to this, I think that there's a deeper question here of, is there the possibility of these large-scale, multi-stage world quests? That idea of, I raise a sunken temple from out in the water, and then me, and then kind of everybody in the area helps contribute towards finding some runes in that temple, and that unlocks a door that we can then go up and defeat a boss at the top. super cool idea, and that almost exactly what we're doing for Demon Invasions. Demon Invasions are 4 stages. They're scenarios that take place out in the world. This is our first foray into really large-scale open-world group content, and we'd like to see how it plays out. We think it's a super cool idea, and it's definitely not off the table. It's something we'd like to explore more in the future now that we have the tech to do it.
Nice.
That said, there are a lot of places that you can trip yourself up design-wise when it comes to doing overworld group content. One of my favorite ones that we've seen in a bunch of other previous games is what we call participation points, where you find just the absolute most degenerate thing that you can do in order to get the best loot from doing that particular thing.
If I just stand in the back and heal one person for the next 15 minutes, I get so many participation
You get the best
points.
loots, even though I didn't
really do anything, and that guy was just standing around the whole time anyway.
So there's definitely some hiccups there that we want to make sure that we smooth out before we make this a kind of a constant and continual system that we'll see during the Legion invasion process. But now that we have the tech, man, sky's the limit. And I think this is one of the coolest things about World Quests is that ideas like this come up constantly now that we have the system, and both on the forums and internally. It's a little bit whatever you can think of we can put into the game at this point, and that's a lot of fun. We would very much like to hear all of your wacky ideas. Go to the forums, go to Twitter, tell us what your ideas for World Quest are, especially after you've played them for a little while and you've got an idea of where we should take the system, because we think it's a really cool system. We'd like to do a V3 and a V4 into the future.
Yeah, and it's maybe worth noting that's something that often tends to happen with brand new features and expansions. Like the one that comes to mind for me is Scenarios with Mists of Pandaria. That was a system that we came out with Scenarios, and Scenarios, they kind of had their niche, but there was cool technology behind it. That was then reused in different ways. So a lot of the quests that you do in Warlords are technically scenarios. You don't queue for them necessarily, but that tech was sort of reused to do things like there's sort of that endpoint in Gorgron, for example, where you go up and you fight against waves and waves of the Iron Horde, and that's technically a scenario, and that technology was used in a new way to sort of expand the questing functionality.
Exactly. Create really intimate questing spaces where we can tell you a very specific story with really powerful elements to it. That said, we also really like the multiplayer element to Scenarios. There was something about that 3-person role agnostic feel that I wouldn't say is off the table in the future. It was a really cool idea, and it's definitely a place we could explore with World Quests.
Yeah, definitely. Just I only brought it up as just like an example of this is a way that developing new technology for a new feature can then be expanded into different ideas in the future.
Totally.
Cool. Let's move on. Next question comes from Gisco, something like that, who said, are there many world quests aimed at groups, Trinity-based or otherwise, or is it predominantly solo play? So kind of we were just talking about Scenarios a little bit. Is there anything that sort of hits that same sort of idea in the group quests, or excuse me, in the world quests?
It's an interesting question because there are world quests that are, like we said, world bosses, dungeon bosses, rare elites, very, very difficult rare spawns, all of those things that you would expect to do in a group, either Trinity-based or otherwise. So yes, all of those things are supported. Also, everything in the game world now is allows up to 5 players on its tap list on your faction, so you should feel strongly incentivized, even when you're in a solo play area, to help other players out with killing their mobs and completing their objectives. And all of the kind of bottleneck creatures, any of those individual rare spawns, quest bosses, rare elites, and world bosses are open tap, so anybody can kind of run into the area and go and attack the creature. We want this particular expansion, especially with everybody seeing kind of all the same world quests at the same time, to feel very group friendly. It's an MMO after all.
Yeah, cool. Moving on. Next question from Ashlina, who asked, how do World Quest reset timers work, and how often do they refresh in one play session? So you kind of talked about this a little bit earlier with like the capacitant side of things, but I guess more directly addressing the question, how do those reset timers actually work?
We were talking a little bit earlier about world quests being segmented into buckets. So you have like the High Mountain Faction bucket, and you've got PvP bucket, etc., etc. Each of these different buckets has a different number of world quests that they spawn. They also have different respawn timers. You're going to find world quests that refresh once a week, like the world bosses, that refresh every 3 days, like the rare elites, that refresh every 3 hours, like some of the PvP objectives, or every 6 hours, like some of the faction objectives. So the answer to this question is really all over the place. We want the game world to feel dynamic, but at the same time, you should feel like there are check-in times. You shouldn't have to look at your map every 15 minutes.
Right.
And that's where we decided on the 3-hour, 6-hour marks as, okay, maybe every 3 hours I can look at my map, I can see what has changed. You should see... I should have come up with the number before coming into this meeting, but at least over 10, 20 things are going to refresh within an individual play session, as long as you stay on for that particular period of time. Cool. Or if you log in, early in the morning and you do the things that are really good for your player progression at the beginning of the day, you log in later in the day, you'll see a wider variety of different things up at the end of the day.
Cool. So it's kind of this sort of feel of maybe I log in and I want to run some mythic dungeons for a little while. I sort of check my world quests. Oh, there's a couple of them over here that I want to do. Go do those. Run some mythic dungeons. And then once I've done a couple of those, maybe I check again and see if there's any other world quests that have popped up. Just sort of something to kind of keep your eye on and be checking in with. Cool. All right. Next question from Ray Kingsfall on Twitter, who asked, with world quests being relevant for our character progression, are there any plans on keeping them entertaining even after weeks? So this is a concern I have seen from a few people where they're kind of worried that, okay, obviously world quests, there's a lot of value there. Like we've talked a lot so far today, just in terms of like there are things that you're going to want to go and do in these world quests. How do we make sure that 6, 12, 40 weeks down the line, we're not like, oh, these world quests, I have to go do a world quest again.
No, it's louse off foot again. I mean, it's a really good question, and answering this question is like the holy grail of MMO design, right? Like, how do I keep a player entertained for 3 years doing one particular thing?
Yeah.
And the answer to that question is that, well, first, we wanted to front load, make as many world quests as we could and of a wide variety so that it always feels like you're seeing new things. Like we mentioned earlier, you're not going to see the same world boss for 2.5 months. And there are, mini games, and there are clicky games, and there are kill quests, and there are creatures with a wide variety of different abilities where every one of these supercharged rare spawns that spawn can spawn up with 10 different abilities that are specific to their zone. So every time you fight them, it's going to be a little bit different of an experience. That said, something that we're going to be strongly looking out for on the forums and for looking for you, the community, to give us a lot of feedback on is, man, when do these things start to feel a little bit stale? When do particular world quests start feeling like they're coming up too often? Or they need a revamp. Because like we were talking about earlier, it's actually relatively painless for us to add additional things into those buckets and to take things out when it feels like we need to revamp the system. So yeah, I mean, please let us know when you're starting to feel there's a little bit of malaise there, when we need to distribute you some more content, and we will get right on that.
Yeah.
But we do have more world quests created than we've ever made in an endgame before, and that is our so that's our initial thrust.
Hopefully after that like 6, 10, 40 week time period, maybe there's a world quest that you're starting to get kind of tired of because it's the 5th time that you've seen it ever at that point. Not because
slightly different world than MOP, where it was like every day for 2 months.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Another question here from Maury, who asked, I barely ever see relics as world quest rewards. Will they spawn more frequently, or is this the correct rate? So obviously, they've been playing in the beta and doing a bunch of world quests. How do you feel about the current spawn rate of relics in world quests in the beta?
So for anybody that's not familiar with relics, they are essentially a power item that you slot into your artifact weapon. They're roughly similar to how weapon drops used to work in the old world, where you would have gotten a new weapon. Instead, we give you a relic this time because you're continuing to power up the same weapon. That said, we realized that the spawn rate that was occurring on beta was too low, and we have since made several changes to up the spawn rate. You're correct.
Okay, cool. So, not the correct rate. They will spawn more frequently. Excellent. Question here again from Ashlina, who asked, will my friends see different world quests than I do? And how does grouping work in this case? That's a good question. If I log in and I have these 10 world quests, does my guild member have 10 different world quests, and are we able to do each other's world quests?
For the great majority of them, outside of individual quest progression in a zone like Suramar, like we were talking about, you will all see the same world quests. So it should be very easy for you to log in, get your friends, and then go and determine kind of what we're going to do as a group today. You will see the same world quests as everybody in your region, so feel free to invite anybody on your friends list to come do world questing with you. And you'll all see relatively the same loot from these world quests as well. We didn't want there to be a case where you all log in and Josh sees a trinket dropping from this particular world quest that he really wants, and I see I don't know, a small amount of order hall resources or gold or something I'm not particularly excited in.
Right.
Instead, we'll both see that we get a trinket from that world quest, and we can determine together what the best way to progress as a group is.
Cool. That helps take a lot of the pressure off of me individually going in and checking world quests all the time as well, because as long as like I keep in fairly regular like I have a guild that I play with, and maybe this is not always the situation, but I have a guild that I've been playing with since Classic, and I talk to a lot of those guys even outside of WoW. So for me, this is a situation where now I can be fairly confident that if that mount that I've really been after or something shows up in a world quest, or you're like, oh, there's boots, man, Lore really needs some better boots, then someone can be like, hey, log on right now, there's this world quest, you can go in and do this world quest and you can get some new boots, or you can get that mount or something. So that way you can kind of, it sort of makes it a little bit more social in that aspect, where a lot of people are keeping an eye on it.
You get your text from your friends in the morning saying, hey, this dragon's up, and it's definitely going to drop its mount today. We're all going to go attack it at 2 p.m.
Nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
And that said, like, for those of you that have already gotten the loot from that particular thing, we also have fallback loots. That's all part of the loot 2.0 system. There's always going to be something for you to get from that world quest.
Cool. Question here from Mayorin, who said, will world quests be the only way to obtain some rewards like reputation, artifact power, order hall resources, etc., or will they be interchangeable with, for example, spending your day running dungeons for the same rewards? So kind of asking, is the only way to get any of this stuff from doing world quests, or am I able to go do like dungeons and stuff instead?
So it's kind of a couple of different questions in here, because each of these reputation, artifact, power, order hall resources is a little bit different of a loot axis and comes from a different location. Reputation, your best bet is going to be doing your emissary quests. Those give you your biggest jump of reputation for the day, and then choosing which reputation you want the rewards from. So you go to that zone and you do quests for that particular reputation. Order hall resources, you're going to want to pick and choose from all of the world quests that grant order hall resources. It's your best way to get those, and the ones that grant order hall resources grant quite a few. Artifact power is the you can do anything kind of element to the game. If you are the dungeon guy, that, man, I am dungeon tank, and that is what I do, and I am the best tank in North America.
Hello, I am dungeon tank.
I'm dungeon man. You can absolutely do that. You can grind dungeons as long as you want to get your artifact power up. That's your kind of catch-all. You can do anything to get artifact power.
Nice. Cool. So basically, is the answer to that
there are certain things that world quests are very good at rewarding you with. There are certain things you can do just in dungeons. There are world quest dungeon quests, so the two aren't necessarily mutually exclusive.
Cool. Question from Zephy5315 on Twitter, who asked, I like how world quests get people to go out and do neat things, but can we get the old daily quests back too? This person really misses Lao Softfoot. But yeah, no, obviously there's a lot of differences between the new world quest system and the old daily quest system. The old system, a lot of people actually really loved that progression of, I'm going to go through this list of things to do in a given day, just because it's a diverse game with lots of different types of people. So that old style of daily quests, is that something on the table at this point?
That should really be what faction world quests feel like. Faction world quests are essentially daily quests that spawn every 6 hours instead of every day, and you don't have to go to an initial quest giver to get them. They're just kind of out there in the world. But other than that, and the fact that you can get better loot from them, there really is not a huge difference between the two. I think one of the things that this question is really getting to is, are we going to see world quests that both feel very grounded in the world, it feels like I'm doing something for a particular faction, and feel like I'm making progress with that faction, or I'm doing things for a particular person? And yes, to both of those questions. One of our major thrusts with world quests was making sure that it felt like you were doing things that made sense for the people in that particular zone. You were getting talking heads, which is our new little tech where a little bubble pops up with the character, and they ask you to do particular things. They read the quest text to you, essentially, so you don't have to go talk to them and get your quest text at the very beginning. Are all of the characters that you've been doing level up quests for. And in a lot of cases, they're saying, hey, can you come back to this farm that you cleared out earlier? We're going to tell the second half to that story. It's become infested again, and this time the infestation is worse, and we need you to do something slightly different. So that lets us drive forward a lot of those quest storylines in individual cases. But at the same time, we wanted to have that sense of a faction that feels like it has a long, expansive, and progressive story, and that's, again, what you're going to find in Suramar.
Sweet. Suramar definitely sounds like a really cool place that I'm looking forward to.
Lorehound, that Yeah, I think you're gonna like it. We spent a lot
Well.
of time building up the story there. Yeah,
Nice.
if you're a lore hound.
If I'm a lore hound. More of a lore kitten, honestly.
Oh,
So question here from
back to pet battles.
Question here from this person who says which parts of the pre-event will be gone when Legion launches, which parts will be available throughout Legion and maybe beyond. I apologize that I'm not able to pronounce your name.
Good question, Metzelsep.
Show off.
So good question. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Legion pre-launch events, it all starts with a Legion kickoff. I'm going to try to do this without spoiling too much, and I'm going to screw it up at some point, so I apologize.
I've got a hammer
when you
over
put your
here.
finger in your
just
ear.
ready to just like. I don't actually have a hammer.
He doesn't. I was scared. During the Legion pre-launch, you will have both this kind of explosive initial experience where demon hunters are unlocked and major things happen in the world at the Tomb of Sargeras, as well as several sets of quests that unlock over time during the pre-launch period. They're going to be very lore heavy. You're going to meet some really cool characters. And they're definitely things that we feel like for players that are playing during that period of time, it's going to be awesome lore, and it will help drive the story into Legion. It tells that whole story in a way that we're very excited is actually in the game for you to experience. That said, if you are a player that's coming back after Legion launches, after 8:30, that's a very long and drawn-out experience to send you through before you get to start your artifact, and then even after that, before you start to get to play with your friends. So we're going to be shortcutting that experience a little bit. You're still going to go through the main story beats, but in terms of the stuff that unlocks during the pre-launch, you won't go through all of those quests.
Right.
You get shortcut to kind of the end of the story where... Spoiler alert, Dalaran moves over to the Broken Isles, and you get to experience that kind of the beginning and the finale of the pre-launch storylines. That said, anytime that you want to go and experience any of those intervening storylines that you might have missed, you can go to an archivist in Dalaran, and she will allow you to kind of go back in time and experience the stuff that happened during the pre-launch. We think the lore is really cool. We don't want it to go anywhere. There's some neat loot that you can get from there. So it's always going to be around anytime you want.
And then, of course, the demon invasion is a big thing as well.
So starting the very first week of when the Broken Shore and all those things unlock, the demons will also start invading the zones across Azeroth, and this will increase intensity over time. That is something that will be exclusive to the pre-launch period. You will not be able to go back and do demon invasions. And please keep in mind that there are a bunch of exclusive pre-launch pieces of gear and loot and a battle pet and a toy and achievements you can get there. So, you're going to want to jump in, and you're going to want to help us defend against the Legion as they start taking over Azeroth.
Nice. It's possibly worth mentioning here is I'm just put my community manager hat on for a second, which doesn't fit because I have too much hair. The stuff that you're talking about right now doesn't necessarily immediately activate when the pre-expansion patch actually releases. So the pre-expansion patch comes out. We kind of gave it a little bit of time to make sure, or we will kind of give it. I guess it hasn't happened yet, so I should speak in future tense. We will kind of give it a little bit of time to make sure, everything's working functionally, everything's going smoothly, give you a little bit of time to get used to the class changes and everything, and then all of this stuff will actually activate. So when the pre-expansion patch comes out and all of this stuff isn't immediately available, don't panic. You're not missing it. It just hasn't activated yet.
This gives us an awesome opportunity during that first couple of weeks to make sure the servers are stable, to make sure the classes are stable, and nobody's going absolutely crazy with abilities, and really focus on making sure that all of those things are a great experience before we start creating entire zone-wide invasions that are absolutely wacky.
Yeah. Let's make sure everything works before we break it.
Sorry, server engineers.
Question from Falstadan on Twitter, who asked, will World Quest scale past the normal raid threshold? Meaning, will eye levels on gear keep increasing once you are above 840?
Yes. World Quests and indeed dungeons and raids can give you upgraded loot. Pretty much anything you can do as an endgame piece of content in Legion can grant you loot all the way up to the max level of Mythic Titan Forged that you can get in that expansion pack. Cool. Or in that tier. Yeah.
And we've talked about that a little bit before, but just to sort of, I guess, reiterate, what that means is, say, for example, you're doing a Mythic raid, there's like a base level that is always going to be higher than other stuff that you can do. If you're killing Mythic raid bosses, the base absolute minimum item level of gear that you can get was always going to be pretty high, whereas if you're doing like a low-end world quest, it's going to start a lot lower off. But there's always that like little bit of a chance that things will be improved, and maybe you end up getting some like crazy, ridiculous, awesome piece of gear off of something.
Exactly. The higher the difficulty setting, the thing you're doing, the higher the average loot that it's going to drop, but also the higher your personal item level is, the higher your average loot you will drop.
So that way, if you are a Mythic Raider, you shouldn't feel like you should stop Mythic Raiding and just go do World Quest. You're still going to get much better stuff out of Mythic Raiding.
But you also have a better chance at getting an upgrade from World Quest than somebody that was a much lower item level.
Yeah. Question here from Splut Muscle.
Sounds delicious.
He says, can you elaborate a little on how World Quests dovetail with the Order Halls?
Sure. So order halls, like we mentioned a little bit earlier, they're a little bit different than the garrison mission system. They're intended to funnel back into your gameplay. You're going to level up your order hall tech tree, and that will give you the ability to do cool calldowns. You're going to be able to get bodyguards that you can assign to certain zones to come and help you with your world questing. You can increase your artifact knowledge level so that when you do world quests or other content that give you artifact power, there's a huge multiplier on that, so you get even more artifact power. We want the order hall system to feel like it makes your go out into the world and do things gameplay better and more fun.
Cool. Yeah, and I think we've talked about this a lot in the past as well, but it's possibly worth mentioning here. Order halls are not meant to be garrisons again, basically. Like, there's obviously lots of systems. We were talking earlier about different systems that have been introduced in expansions and then sort of recalibrated into something else. So if you go and you look at your mission table in the order hall, you're going to see a list of followers, and you're going to say, oh, this is the follower mission system. But it's actually very different the way that it works out. We sort of took the really cool bits of garrisons that kind of everybody liked, which, like, the bodyguard was always a cool system because that's somebody that's coming along with you out in the world and helping you kill stuff. We didn't take the things like, okay, here's a mine that you need to run around inside of and go after this every day, which is really cool for some people. Obviously, a lot of people really did enjoy that, but for a lot of other people, that sort of became like my wizard chores that I have to go and do every day.
Yep.
So just worth mentioning again, there are going to be things in the order halls that you're going to look at and say, well, that's a system from the garrison. They're going to be pretty different in actual implementation.
Well, in the garrison, you could look at the mission system and say, this is a major contributor to my player power, to my character's progression. It's sort of the opposite with order halls. It's a major contributor towards you doing other things to increase your player power.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's making sure that you're going out in the world and doing stuff. And maybe you come back to your order hall every once in a while to check in with people, but then you go right back out again. Cool. Question from Ragald, who asked, are there any plans to add level scaling to old zones for questing? So I guess this isn't directly a world quest question, but kind of talking... It is a world question, yeah. Talking about how in Legion, obviously, you can kind of go and pick and choose between different zones as you're leveling up. You don't have to immediately go to, like, Borean Tundra and then go to Dragonblight and so on. There isn't, like, a direct linear progression. How do you feel about the idea of adding that sort of scaling to old zones as well, so that you can say, I'm going to start in Stranglethorn Vale for some reason, or something like that?
For a lot of awesome reasons. Goblins are cool.
That's true.
So, I mean, it's a really interesting question. It's very similar to the earlier question about why don't we add world quests to the older zones? And I think a lot of this is getting back to the idea of, hey, older zones were pretty cool. They were very pretty. They had some really neat storylines. I didn't do Westfall, and I want to go and see what that storyline was because it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We think this idea is super awesome. Legion is kind of our first foray into having level agnostic zones and giving you a complete choice rather than just Breen or Howling Fjord, but you can do any of these 4 zones in any order you want. That said, there are certain things that we want to make sure that don't come back and bite us relative to that kind of thing before we start discussing going wide with it to everywhere else in the world. You've seen us also kind of delve into this idea with time walking as well. And one of those, or 2 of those ideas, rather, are, or potential problems that could come up, are first, that for some players, it doesn't feel very good to not outlevel their content. You want to be able to look at that boar that you were fighting 50 levels ago and say, I own you now, boar. Like, I can one-shot that boar. That boar poses no threat to me. The boar is tiny. It's a boar, right? You want to feel more powerful than it. And the second thing is we want to make sure that content is fun. So I think that if if we were to just level scale all of the older zones at this point, you might go back and do some content in that zone. And we could even level scale the loot so that you were getting, say, transmog loot that could potentially be an upgrade that uses the same loot pyramid tech. But would it be fun, or would it feel like you're fighting a lot of creatures that have abilities from 2008 or earlier? So we want to make sure that it's a fun experience, and we've spent a lot of time on the spawning and gameplay of Legion to make sure that things feel a little bit more challenging now, to make sure that there are points in which you're going to feel a little bit scared. Every once in a while, an Eden's going to walk up behind you, he's going to smack you in the head, and you're going to die, and that's okay. The world was feeling a little bit safe, and it should feel a little bit more difficult now. But we want to make sure that we can hit up all of those points to make sure it's a good experience and we're not just doing it for scaling's sake. That said, it's not off the table. It's an idea that we think is pretty cool as long as we can do it right.
It's actually really funny. I was you're talking about going back and making sure that the old quests are fun. And that they stack up with the way that questing is nowadays, because obviously like Warlords and now Legion have made some huge improvements in there. It's actually really interesting. I was looking on Reddit earlier, and there was a post that someone had made, which was one of those like now I feel old sort of posts, which was I think it's either as of today or sometime in the very recent past, the zones or the quests that were updated in Cataclysm are now as old as they were when Cataclysm updated them.
Yep. It's amazing how fast time flies when you're working on an awesome game.
Yeah. All right. Next question here from Barry, who said, would you talk about how the world quests that have gear rewards scale with the gear you are currently wearing? So talking about like the actual items that you get from those world quests, how does that work compared to what you have equipped?
Great question. So as you increase your personal item level, you will increase the average item level potential of the things that are going to drop from those world quests, and you'll start to see those world quests start to more often as you get 8, 10 and above. They'll start more often dropping 825s, and eventually you'll see all the world quests will swap over to say 825 plus, and they'll start dropping a little bit higher from there. So the average level at which things that are going to drop are going to give you upgrades is going to increase in line with your item level, which should keep everything relevant throughout the life of at least your character getting up to max level gear.
Cool. And just for clarity, is that based off of what you have equipped right now, or is that what you have available to you?
I will need to run that one down. I'm not sure.
Okay. I'm pretty sure, when I was talking with Ian about this, I'm pretty sure, fingers crossed, knock on wood, etc., that it's based off of what you have in your inventory, in your bags, on your character at all. It's not a make sure you equip your highest item level gear.
I remember we had this discussion yesterday, but I just don't want to give any incorrect information. But I'm pretty sure you're right.
Yeah, if I'm wrong, then blame me for it. Question from Posh Tush on Twitter. I maybe should have checked that first. Says, is there any chance that we'll be seeing world quests involving Gilneas somehow in Legion?
Yes, and you will even be seeing quest lines. So some interesting things are going to happen with Gen Greymane and Sylvanas that I'm not going to spoil for you right here.
Right.
But one of the end results you're going to see from that is that both of them take on a very warlike mentality in terms of this new continent and making sure that when we take it over, when we push the Legion back, we're not opening ourselves up to an attack from either side. Neither one of them is putting themselves in a not easily defensible position. There's still pretty significant mistrust between those two. So, in particular...
I can't imagine why.
Well, and just wait till you see the cinematics.
Oh, okay.
So, what you're going to see is there are these group of ancient towers that surround the Broken Isles that are the towers that the wardens used in order to keep the island secure. Now that the wardens' numbers have dwindled very significantly and they're having to deal with the breakout of all of the creatures that were held within the Isle of the Watchers, or the warden's prison area, they really don't have time to man any of these towers anymore, and they're left as heavily defensible locations that skirt the entire island. Obviously awesome places if you're just rolling up and you got a warlike mindset to take over, to hold up in, to put your supplies in, and to send your troops out to. We were alluding to this a little bit earlier with the Warden Towers PvP objectives. You're going to be seeing in a bunch of the different zones all across the continent, Gen's troops and Sylvanas' troops take over these towers, and then they become world quests for the other side to go and try to assault them. Cool.
All right, we got time for one or two more questions. Let's see what we can get here. A question from Zulamesh, who says, will the bonus objective system be carried out in Legion as a great way to earn XP while leveling, or is that being retired? So I guess they're talking about like the different areas in Warlords you'd show up to, and then a little thing would pop up and say, hey, kill a whole bunch of shredders or something like that.
Exactly. You're going to see the bonus objective making its roaring comeback again.
Cool.
Very similar to its implementation in Warlords. If you're in a particular area where we feel like, hey, there's a lot of things to do here, or a lot of things we can give you to do here, or it's feeling like you have just one quest to go to one particular location, but it's a really neat area, you'll often find a bonus objective there to hang out and do something a little extra.
Sweet. All right, let's see if we can get one more question here. Another one here from Splut Muscle, who asked, will world quests have different criteria for completion depending on the class's role?
This is a really fun idea, and I think, again, this gets back to that idea of as soon as we started talking about world quests, it's like, well, what if we did this? Well, what if we did that? Which is great. That's, design-wise, that's a place that you want to be in with a new particular piece of tech or content. Super cool. You're not going to see anything launching in 7.03, but it's a place that's definitely on the table that we'd like to think about exploring. You can almost imagine, back in the day, the old Hunter Lokdalar line, where, fighting those demons, those very particularly huntery demons with your other hunter buddies becomes world quests where they pop up every once in a while, like hunter targets. I think there's a really cool class fantasy there of, you and all of the warlocks in your particular area are rolling into one demon area, and we're enslaving things left and right, and we're calling down infernals and fearing things, and we're just doing warlocky stuff. Or all of the paladins in one area have one particular paladin thing to go do, and that boss has a great big AoE that we all have to bubble at the same time to avoid. And then there's that one dude that didn't use his bubble, so we all get to laugh at him, and then we all shoot our heels onto him, and we really feel like paladins. Like that. Yeah, there's some really cool content there that I think we definitely would like to, or at least talk about.
Yeah, obviously not making any announcements at the moment because this is all just in the theoretical space right now, but it is definitely a really, really cool idea.
And anything that you guys feel very strongly about, especially as you're doing World Quests and you get to see the variety of different content that we've created, places where you'd like us to double down on certain types of content or new types of content you'd like to see introduced, please let us know. All these questions came from the US forums, the EU forums. We do actually read the EU forums. And Twitter. So, reach out to us on any of those community message boards, and we're here and we're listening.
Yeah. Awesome. Definitely. So that's about all the time that we have here for today. So thank you very much for coming here and answering these questions. This has been entertaining, if nothing else, but also there's lots of really cool info as well that we were able to talk about. So next week, we do not have a Q&A scheduled for next week. We do, however, we're working on getting a Q&A together. We haven't scheduled it yet, so hold on to your questions for now. But we will have a Q&A coming up soon, hopefully without the TM, with John LeCraft, and we're going to be talking about the Demon Hunter class. So keep an eye out for that. Again, we don't have a scheduled one next week, but keep an eye out in the very near future for our Demon Hunter Q&A, because that should be really, really exciting. Again, Jeremy, thanks so much for being here today.
No problem. Thanks, Josh. Always great seeing you.
Yeah.
And thank you everybody in the community for all of your questions and for all of your interest in Legion. We really hope you enjoy it. We've put a lot of heart and soul into this one.
Definitely. Thanks so much, guys. We will see you later.